Howdy everybody, welcome back to Gecko Tech and Gaming. So, this is part 2 of a two-part series that I'm doing on Zowie's mice. In my previous Zowie video, I looked at the shape of each of Zowie's series of mice and compared them, as well as discussed what grip styles each of those are good for. If you haven't seen it yet, it's up on my channel. You can take a look and kind of see how you feel about each individual model. Now I gotta warn you up front, I'm gonna sound really mean up front. But don't leave too fast because there's some serious value to Zowie that I think no other mice really have, but I'll get into that once I get through all the important information up front. So before we get to that, let's take a look at the B versus C series mice. The B series of Zowie's mice are the oldest currently available Zowie mice on the market. The B series mice come with a rubber cable, somewhat flexible. It's actually not as bad as it looks, but they are pretty heavy. They are angled slightly up so it doesn't put too much drag on the mousepad surface. And I actually adjusted to the cable faster than I thought I would. The only issue I ran into was even though I had it in a bungee, I found that the cable would swing a lot, especially with faster, wider swipes on the mousepad, and you can kind of feel the weight tugging on your mouse a little bit. It didn't really pull off my aim per se, but it's definitely noticeable, and it's something that you would have to adapt to. Now, the C series brought a few notable upgrades with it. It replaced the rubber with a very flexible, very nice, lightweight paracord cable with a very strongly angled upwards cable support, which means that on top of it being very flexible, it's also not dragging on the mousepad, even more so than the B series. The scroll wheel on the C series was also upgraded to a 24-step wheel versus the 16-step wheel on the B series. I do find that the tensioning on both of them is equally nice. There's just more steps to the C series scroll wheel. In my opinion though, the scroll click actually feels a little better on the B series mice. The C series scroll click is pretty stiff. On the B series, I didn't have any issues with it. Now, as for the side buttons, the B series does sound a little bit more crisp, but there's a good amount of pre-travel, so they don't feel great. They're kind of mushy almost. Whereas the C series does have kind of quieter and oddly softer feeling side buttons. However, there's almost zero pre-travel and very minimal post-travel. Now, something to know up front, the initial release of the C series mice did have some weird connectivity issues. They fixed them with the most recent batch of C series mice, so take it with a grain of salt, just something to keep in mind. So my personal recommendation, if you end up getting a Zowie mouse after these reviews, I would recommend just skipping the B series outright. The weight of the cable flopping around, even with a bungee, is a little bit distracting. And because of the connectivity issues with the C series, I would just recommend buying the C series directly from Zowie's website. That way you know you're getting the most up-to-date C series mouse, and you know for a fact there won't be any connectivity issues. Again, there were a lot of people that didn't have issues, but there are also a lot of people that did have issues. So if you got the old one, you'd be kind of playing a bit of a gamble there. Alright, so now for the big question. How do Zowie mice in 2022 compare to the current competition? A lot of the components on these mice are actually kind of old compared to a lot of the components being put in mice being released today. And on top of that, all of Zowie's mice right now are wired, and they come in at about $70 USD. So a little bit high compared to other wired mice, but let's go through each mouse and kind of do some comparisons. Okay, so the EC series mice, they're ergo mice, and those shapes are pretty widely available. But then there's also Pulsar, which has the X-Lite V2 and the X-Lite Mini V2. When those two mice exist, it's really hard to outright recommend the EC3C. The Pulsar X-Lite Mini V2 is also very compact in shape, has better switches with 80 million, I think, lifespan, Kale 8.0s. The sensor is a 3370, so that's also an improvement. And the weight, the EC3C is roughly 70 grams. The X-Lite V2 Mini is like 50 grams. and it's wireless. So again, it would be a little bit hard to recommend when something like the Pulsar mice exist. The FK series mice are similar, like I mentioned in the last video. Razer's Viper series mice have a very similar shape and size to the FK mice. All of the full-sized Vipers, whether that's the Viper 8K, the regular Viper, Viper Ultimate, or the Viper V2 Pro, they all have better components again. And their switches are all optical, so they're going to have better click latency as well. And price, the Viper 8K, which has a crazy 8,000 hertz polling rate, you can get that for between $50 to $80 on Amazon. And the Ultimate, you can get it as low as $70, $70 to about $100 on Amazon. So those prices are very competitive. There's also the Model O from Glorious. Now, the shape isn't quite the same, but again, very similar. And the wired one is $50, wireless is $80. Again, very competitive prices with the FK Zowie mice. The Zowie S mice are a similar story. Again, there aren't a ton of comparable options, but a couple do come to mind that I haven't personally tried, but I'm aware of. There's the Helios XD3 V2, which is pretty much a clone of the S2. That one comes wireless at $60, but there's also the Ponage Sim, and they actually have an updated version. The wired is $60, wireless is $110, so definitely more expensive for that wireless version. But again, KLA .0s, more durable switches. The sensor, I believe, is a 3370 now on the updated Ponage Sim. One thing I will say is that the Zowie S mice feel super durable. That build quality just doesn't feel as good on Ponage mice that I've tried. And that could really be said with all of Zowie's mice. They're by far the most durable feeling mice that I've ever felt in hand. No flex, no creaking, everything just feels super well made. It feels like it'll last a lifetime. Now onto the ZA. It's a little bit of a different story in my opinion. There really aren't a whole lot of mice that compare. There are a lot of mice that fit in a similar niche as the ZA, but nothing really does a clone of it. The only two mice that really come to mind are the XM1 and the M42 from Xtrfy. The XM1 has a similar aggressive hump that makes it very good for claw, but it doesn't have those notches at the front end, and it's a very wide mouse overall, and it accomplishes that ability to make it easier to lift off with that claw grip by having more aggressive curves on the sides of the XM1. You also have the M42 from Xtrfy, which has a very similar top-down silhouette, but it's also flat compared to the ZA with its very aggressive hump. Somewhat similar, but not as specifically designed for claw grip. Even with that larger hump option for the replaceable shell, it really doesn't compare to the ZA13. So in my opinion, the ZA really is the only Zowie mouse that I would say if you want that shape, you really gotta go with Zowie. There's nothing that compares to that super aggressive hump for maximum stability when you're using claw grip. Okay, now, despite all that, I do believe the Zowie mice still have a lot to offer that nearly all of the other options don't have. And that is the wide variety of sizes for each shape. Now you have like the Viper and then the Viper Mini, then the Model O and the Model O Minus. But for the FK, the ZA, and the EC series of Zowie mice, they all have 3 size options. At the end of the day, I think that mouse size and shape are really the top priority that someone should be looking for in a gaming mouse when they're looking for competition, if you're trying to perform at your best. When it comes to components, the mouse switches, you can just replace those. Even if they do go bad, they're very easy to swap out. And the sensor, yes, it is technically an older sensor being the 3360, but it's still, on paper, considered a flawless mouse. And pro-level tournament gamers have been using these Zowie mice for a really long time. And that shaved off weight All of them are roughly 70 grams for the C-Series mice. That's perfectly usable for competitive settings in my opinion. Now this is part of why I was so enthusiastic about the M42, the fact that you could change the shell shape and get just the right shape for you, because that is the one factor that's going to affect your experience the most, at least with modern mouse components. Especially for the ZA, I haven't seen anything that really compares in terms of how well designed it is for claw grip, specifically because of that very aggressive hump and those projected notches at the front that help with grip in repositioning the mouse on the mousepad. With how variable human hands are, I think that having those options is well worth the cost. That's really where Zowie's mice really earn that price tag. Hey, if you like the M42, but you got stinking monster gorilla hands, sucks for you. It only comes in one size. But if you get a Zowie mouse, there are 3 sizes for several of these mice. One of them only has 2, that's the S1 and S2, but the others have 3 sizes. So nearly anyone can get a Zowie mouse that not only fits their grip style, it also fits their hand size, and you know you're getting good performing components. They might not be top of the line, super futuristic 3395 sensors like what's in the Viper V2 Pro, but the 3360 is perfectly tournament viable. And again, even though they're about 70 grams each, that's really not that bad. I believe that the shape is going to affect your performance more than the weight. As long as the mouse isn't like 80 or 90 grams, 70 grams is super easy to adapt to, and that shape is going to benefit you more than 10, 15 grams of weight will. This is especially valid in the situations where those alternative mice don't have multiple sizes. If your hand is right in the middle and that size of the alternative is good for your hand, great, that would be a good option for you. You'd be saving some money, getting some better components. But if your hand is on the smaller side or the larger side, you're kind of out of luck. Those situations are where Zowie mice really shine. So that's it. At the end of the day, if you're someone who has larger or smaller hands, or you're really looking for a specific size, you know exactly what you're looking for, but the size doesn't quite match your hand size or your preferences for the more commonly available ones, I would definitely suggest trying out a Zowie mouse. Not only will it fit your hand way better, it's almost like putting on a custom-made glove. It just feels right. Not only that, but they are also built super well. So even though, yeah, the skates aren't great, the switches aren't that great either, both of those are super easy to replace. And again, the sensor is really nice. I performed just as well with the EC3C with a 3360 sensor as I did with a 3370 sensor in the M42 wireless. So that was a lot to go over. Thank you for sticking around the whole time. That was a lot. I really hope that this video helps you to decide whether or not a Zowie mouse is right for you. And I do think it's right choice for a lot of people, but you just need to look deeper into what your grip style is, what your hand size is, and what the competition has to offer in that sense. So again, thank you so much for being here. Super appreciate y'all. Like, comment, subscribe. You guys take care, God bless, stay healthy, and I will see you on the next video. All right? Later.